Hey, everybody. It's Evan Grant, live from Milwaukee, where I just got here and took the train up from Chicago. Had a nice lunch in the public market. The Milwaukee public market is a fantastic area, one of my favorite spots around the league. Just wander around. They've got some nice restaurants in there and around there. It's a really nice, the third ward is a really nice area. Uh, So I'm enjoying my off day by spending it with you guys, and I'll be here to take your Rangers questions and complaints for the better part of the next hour. I'm sure you guys have plenty of things to say. Maybe you've lost all interest. Although I will say in our newsletter um, that is free to subscribe to, and maybe Joey can drop that into the link for that into the chat in case you don't have it. Um, 2 weeks ago, I asked folks if they're still watching and if this Rangers team has worn on their nerves. And the answers were yes and yes, that that this team has worn on their nerves as fans, and that 2 years of what amounts to mediocrity, 3 years if you want to go back to 2024, has tested their patience. But most of these fans also realize that there is a playoff bid at stake. And for as poorly as the Rangers played this week, they're still a half game behind Houston in the American League West, 2 games back of a wild card spot with 28 games to go. And as I mentioned in a column last week, playoff bids for this organization have largely been few and far between in the 55 years since the Washington Senators decided to call home in Texas. Um, and most of those were concentrated in two small spurts, right? Between 96 and 99, when the Rangers went to the playoffs 3 out of 4 years, and 2010 through 2016, where they went every year, played more than 162 games every year, with the exception of 2014. So, by and large, it's been dry. And when you've got an opportunity to be in a playoff race, it should be exciting. Be great if the Ranger players would hop on board with that and give everybody something to consider as exciting good baseball, because the last 2 games were decidedly not that, as they dropped 2 games in Chicago after winning the first game of that series 11-2. Starting pitching the last 2 games with Jacob deGrom, the highest paid pitcher on the club, and Mackenzie Gore, the biggest offseason acquisition, both laying big eggs against the White Sox. And the offense, after showing a bunch of promise on Monday, not being able to capitalize on opportunities very well the following 2 nights. The Rangers did take 10 walks last night, which is notable because it's, I think, the 36th time in club history, or at least since they moved to Texas, that they've taken at least 10 walks in a 9-inning game. And it was the 6th time that they've lost such a game. So even the recipe for what should be an automatic win did not come to fruition, largely because the Rangers just wasted opportunity after opportunity with runners in scoring position. So that's where we are as we go into an off day today ahead of a big series with Milwaukee that I think I'll give you a quick preview of what I think I'm going to write for tomorrow morning's paper and what will be online later tonight. But I think obviously every series the rest of the way has an impact on this season, and this will have significant impact, obviously. But I also think that there may be some long-range impact as well, because the Brewers are everything that the Rangers are not, and I think everything the Rangers kind of aim to be offensively, which is scrappy, efficient, making the most of their run-scoring opportunities. Uh, and I do think that there's a possibility that once this season ends, depending on, look, I think regardless of how the season ends, short of a World Series win, I think there's going to be some significant changes to this roster. We can get into that later. But I think if you're looking for the template for what I think Chris Young would like for the organization. I think really what is Skip Schumacher's preference as well, based on the way he came up in the Cardinals organization. It is this style of aggressive baseball that the Brewers are playing, where they're willing to take lots of walks, willing to work pitchers really hard, run the bases aggressively. They don't slug the ball a ton, but they score runs. So keep that in mind as you're watching this weekend series. Um, and now we're going to get to some questions. But I will say the one disclaimer before we do that, guys, is remember, if you're not a subscriber to the YouTube channel, please subscribe and like the YouTube channel if you do, in fact, like it. Um, if you're not a subscriber to the Morning News website, I think we have a 25-cent special right now. I and my family would appreciate it, to say nothing of my bosses. And please put on any comments you have about the quality of this chat into the YouTube chat, or into the YouTube comment section afterwards, because I do like to check on these things and get some feedback from you. So anyway, here we go, and we are going to start with, as always, I wish everybody on this Rangers team was as consistent as Charles Tucker, who every week leads us off with a question. It's really predictable, and that's great. It's also always usually a good question. The Rangers haven't had many players with that consistency. And speaking of which, Charles says, "Hey Evan, the team is getting harder to watch. Where would the Rangers be without Duran, Quantrill, and Latz? These three have been the most quote-unquote consistent. Am I missing someone?" Yeah, I mean, they obviously have been, and Cal's consistency has been in different roles, right? As a reliever, starting out as kind of a long reliever, then moving into the spot starter role, and now as a starter. Um, but as I said to somebody yesterday, you know, the two players who have performed to expectations or better, really better, have been Jacob Latz and Ezekiel Duran. Zeke has reestablished himself as an everyday player, even if he doesn't have an everyday position. And Jacob, after losing out on that starter's role in spring training, though not through anything he did wrong, the Rangers just thought it was better deployment with Kumar Rocker in the rotation, Jacob in the bullpen. They have been consistent, and both of them had strong cases for All-Star bids. Jacob ended up being the only Ranger on the All-Star team. But I do think you are missing one person, Charles, and I think it's easy to overlook that. Josh Young has been very consistent when he's been on the field. And now, obviously, he's missed a month of time now with his calf injury, and it doesn't seem to be a resolution here coming up in the next few days. I don't anticipate him joining this team at the best until they go to Seattle on September 7th. I think it's an off day, but they play there the 8th. But Josh has been very consistent at the plate. He's not had a great defensive year at third base, but he's had a tremendous bounce back year in line with his 2023 season. It's just that right now it's easy to overlook him with him on the IL. With what, again, I understand fans are frustrated. What was initially indicated to be an injury that would miss 1 or 2 days, but is now taken a month. And listen, there are certain things you learn over the course of being a beat writer for as long as I've done it. And the old timers always used to say, calf injuries, very tricky. Calf injuries and rib or oblique injuries, very tricky, because you can feel good one day and then you can push off the wrong way the next, and you're back to square one. And that's kind of where Josh has been. So I get fans are frustrated. I think the Rangers always want to estimate the return for these players on the most realistic scenarios, but I think a lot of times it looks like this club is is maybe considered being aggressive with how they think players will recover, and I don't think that's the case. It's just that it's a tricky injury in a weird location right at the bottom of his calf. So that's your Josh Young update, and I think Charles that answers your question. I hope it does. Um, and now we go to the 48 simple man, Jacob DeGrom. Evan, who do you think will win the West Division and why? So here's what I think. I this is only kind of chic to quote a current internet meme or trend to say right now because Cal Raleigh's been hot for a couple of days. But if you look at Seattle's schedule the rest of the way, the Mariners have a tough 10-day stretch here that kind of finishes up with that series against the Rangers that starts on September 8th. But their last 22 games of the season, the Mariners play 16 of those against the Rockies, the A's, and the Angels, the three teams with the worst records in baseball. It gives them the easiest schedule, according to Tankathon's remaining schedule strength calculator, of all the teams that are kind of in the playoff picture. In addition, the Mariners have two series against the Rangers and Astros. Both of the series are in Seattle. And so they get the opportunity to have some head-to-head competition that neither the Rangers or the Astros will have. So, am I convinced on the Mariners that they'll win the division? I'm not convinced on anybody winning this division, but I do think that they are lurking in a very dangerous spot. Again, I think all it may take to win this division is for one of these three teams to have a nice 10-day stretch, a 8-2 stretch. If anybody can roll off an 8-2 stretch here, they may take control of the division and walk off with it. But I don't know that any of those teams have shown me the ability to do that this year. And so it's just going to come down to something that we don't see or aren't seeing at this point in time. Now, if Cal Raleigh gets hot, again, you've got guys with each of those teams capable of carrying a team on its back. Yordan Alvarez has done that all year for the Astros. Corey Seager, you would think, is capable of doing that for the Rangers, and until these last 2 days, had been on an absolutely superstar pace in August. I think he was, after Monday's game, he had a 975 OPS from the time he returned on July 31st through that Monday game, in which he had 3 hits, and I think that was the 7th time in 8 games he had multiple hits. And then, of course, he's had back-to-back offers after I proclaimed that Corey Seager is indeed back. And the Astros have Cal Raleigh, who has been just awful all year, but he has hit 4 home runs in the last 2 days. He has shown that some signs of maybe starting to spark out of a season-long slump. I'm sure Seattle fans feel the same way about hearing that Rangers fans have heard about the possibility of Corey Seager getting hot. They've heard it. They're waiting to see it happen. But so if you're asking me today who I think has the easiest path to the title, I think it's Seattle. They've also got the best pitching. So it is lining up for the Mariners to roll off a nice stretch and maybe take control of this division. The Rangers still are ahead of Seattle by 2 games. They still have some say in this matter, particularly if they go to Seattle and win some games on the road, something they haven't done since the end of June. The Rangers, with that loss at Chicago last night, that gave them 6 consecutive road series losses dating back to the 1st of July. They won 2 out of 3 at Cleveland, June 29th through July 1st. Have not won a road series since. Have not won a road series since the All-Star break. So again, this is something the club's going to have to show me before I'm willing to believe that they're capable of it. The Rangers' remaining road series are at Milwaukee, which has the major's best record this weekend. Then they go in early September to Seattle and Arizona. And then they finish it up the final 3 days of the season at Minneapolis and the Twins. So there you go. Rarities. Whose decision was it to have Duran bunt with 2 outs? Runners at second and third base in the first inning on Tuesday, I believe. Um, yeah, that was Zeke trying to bunt for a hit. Nobody put that on. Nobody put a bunt on there. Um, Skip Schumacher's not going to put a bunt on with 2 outs. It was Zeke trying to bunt for a hit. And again, I applaud the idea that Zeke is willing to do anything he thinks is necessary to try and gain an advantage to get on base. But I think that was just poor judgment. Um, Now, if you want to question the manager's decisions, I thought that last night, Wednesday night, fourth inning, I think the Rangers got the first two on. Cody Freeman batting out of the ninth spot bunted them both over. Um, and you like that in a vacuum. I like that in a vacuum. In retrospect, with Seattle now has or Seattle, the White Sox then have a left-handed reliever in the game. They leave Jock Peterson in to face the lefty. Jock, who had homered in his previous at bat against the righty, pops out to the catcher, and then Corey Seager strikes out. Um, there are a couple things there. You could have pinch hit Jake Berger at that point for Jock, but I think there was so much game left that Skip Schumacher wanted to hold. He thought that the Rangers would have another opportunity later in the game where there would be a high leverage at bat. Didn't think the game was going to get away from the Rangers again. And Jock had just homered in his previous at bat, and even though the Rangers don't usually let Jock Peterson face lefties, I got to tell you, with as poorly as everybody is going, I've got as much faith in Jock against left-handers as I do any of the other bench options. So, it's my thought. Uh, Gallagher champ. Do you come to Milwaukee often? No, I do not. I think the last time I was here was 2022. Sean made the trip, I'm pretty sure, in 2024. And of all the 30 parks currently active in baseball, with the exception of Sacramento, which I've only been to one time, and the A's have only played there for 2 seasons, this is the park I've been to the least. I like AmFam Field, or whatever it's being called now. I like Milwaukee. In the summertime, Milwaukee is absolutely wonderful. We're here. I'm kind of staying on the lake or close to it. And the downtown area has got some really vibrant spaces. So I like that. The weather's gorgeous right now. Um, my first road trip with the Rangers, oddly enough, though, was to Milwaukee when the Brewers were still in the American League. That was the start of the '97 season, and it was quite a day. It was, I think, 29 degrees, day game, but like an afternoon game. I think it was a 2 or 3 o'clock start. And as you well know, in Wisconsin, they can tailgate and they can drink some beer. Fans have been drinking beer all morning. The Brewers gave out a, uh, a souvenir baseball before the first pitch to everybody. And then after introductions, the entire field was showered with these souvenir baseballs with rowdy fans, throwing them all back. Later in the day, a pipe running underneath the upper concourse burst, and there was water pouring down on the lower concourse stands, and they had to delay the game for a few minutes to get that all settled. And then we had a weather postponement the next day, which didn't get played until August of that year. So it was quite a first trip to Milwaukee. At that point in time, also, Bud Selig was still very active not active with the Brewers, but he was the interim commissioner and still held the Brewers kind of in a trust with his family. And he lived here. He still does live here. Um, and he would come through the press box all the time. And so the commissioner would come through. He knew Jerry Fraley from covering labor. They would have conversations, and here was the commissioner of baseball just walking through, greeting people, cracking wise. It was a fun time, but I haven't been here very much. Uh, Gallagher still has another comment. Definitely wish I was a team isn't competitive so I can flip a switch and stop watching person, to be honest. Hey, I get it. I mean, here's the deal. I would again say, sports is supposed to bring you joy. And if it's not bringing joy, there's nothing wrong with turning off the team for a few days. But at the same point in time, it is baseball and it is a playoff race. And the Rangers, they're so inconsistent and unpredictable. You don't know what you're going to get from night to night. So I think the team is still worth watching because I think there is a playoff race to be determined. But I also get that there are people who are like, I just feel like I've invested too much time and energy into this team right now um, to really stick with it. I wish I could give you some direction there, Gallagher Champ. I know on my off nights at home, we still watch the game every night, partly for work because I need to know what's going on. But, the team is playing. I want to watch the game. So, um, David, David Rajanov, I worry most of the front office narrative of we are right there in the mix when I think that is a total coincidence. I wish the analysis in the offseason recognizes this team is deeply flawed. David, I do think that there is a self awareness that this team has flaws. I don't think you can come back and do the same thing for a fourth consecutive year. There's so many um, external pressures right now. Who knows what the labor situation is going to be, how that impacts the payroll, that the farm system is yet to start producing again. Uh, so it's going to create some external pressures. In addition to all of this, if you do want to restart this team, so to speak, and trade the guys with the biggest salaries to reallocate that money elsewhere, you know, Seager's essentially got a no trade clause right now. There's no trades allowed in baseball at this point in time, and with the completion of this season, he'll have 10 years of service and 5 years with the Rangers, giving him a full no trade protection clause. Unless, of course, that gets changed in the next CBA. Who knows? Um, and Jacob DeGrom also has full no trade protection. I know DeGrom exercised that no trade protection at this deadline. I think he would be more amenable if this team doesn't get to the playoffs. I think he would be more amenable to considering a deal in the offseason um, if the club is changing directions. Problem there is, Jacob has a 4.21 ERA this year, and he's 38 years old. Uh, it's league average. The league average ERA for a starter is 4.22, or it was after Tuesday night. Um, and so I don't know what the value in him is in terms of a trade, especially with there's $37 million left on his deal for 2027. So you wouldn't get much if you were hoping to get another team to take on most of that payroll or most of that salary. You're not going to get much back in return. Um, and I'm just not sure what prospects you'd get if you were willing to swallow some of that salary. So it's a difficult proposition. I think the same kind of I think the same exists with Corey Seager to some extent. Corey, I think, has more value. He's playing well again after coming back from the back issues, but he's also got a much longer commitment. This is just his fifth year on this 10-year deal, and so a team that takes him on is looking at $155 million in remaining salary, and the Rangers would like to move as much of that as possible. So they're either going to have to swallow a lot of salary there to get a decent prospect back or two, or they're going to have to basically make a salary dump trade. But those are the first two places I think the Rangers have to start this offseason is what is the considerations for what this team needs to be in the future, and if there's any payroll guidance on what the payroll needs to be. If Ray Davis wants to bring the payroll down to 200 or 185, that certainly is prerogative. But in this offseason, then it makes it important for you to move those guys that are making $30 million a year, turn those two guys that are next year would earn almost $70 million between the two of them, turn them into 3 or 4 players to plug other holes on the roster. You know, that's you've got to find a way to reallocate those funds somewhere else, and you've got to get approval from Ray Davis that if you move those salaries, that you can in fact reallocate that money somewhere. Because it makes no sense just to dump salary unless that's what you're told is to just dump salary. So we'll see where this goes during the offseason. Has Kamal Rocker done enough to have a guaranteed rotation spot next season, or will he be in competition for one? Interesting question. I do think I lean towards the idea that he will go into the season next year with a rotation spot. Kamar is 5-10 with a 4.41 ERA. We've been over that he's made some fielding mistakes that have cost him. All of that is understood, but really, I'm not sure what other options the Rangers have unless they're going to go out and trade or add via free agency. And we just talked about how difficult that may be. So I think, right now you look going into the season, if you trade, let's say you trade DeGrom and don't trade Eovaldi, you're looking at a rotation that's Eovaldi, potentially Gore, because you could trade him, Leiter, Bradford, Rocker, and I don't know who your depth options are. Certainly you could try and re-sign Cal Quantrill, but he may have a more attractive offer after pitching back to the way he's pitched at 2022 levels this year. So, and I don't know any of the minor league pitchers are ready to step up. David Davalillo has made some progress here lately, but I don't feel good about any of the guys that were going into this season as potential breakout guys or guys who could come up from the minor leagues being ready to help you in 2027. So you're going to have to either spend money in free agency to add some pitching, trade for some pitching, or guarantee a spot to Rocker. And I think with Kamar's upside, there's still going to be. He may be in competition. Let's put it this way: he may be in competition, but I think he's going to be the front runner for that competition and a strong front runner. Yes, there are things Kamar's got to do better. We've talked about the fielding stuff for 2 years now. He's got to throw more first pitch strikes. He's got to find a third pitch that he actually is willing to throw. And he's got to control the running game. He has controlled the running game better this year, but he's got to do a better job of it continuing. So there are significant projects for Kamar to work on this offseason as well. During some series, it seems like a batter from the opposing team will just hammer the Rangers pitchers. Why do you think the Rangers keep pitching to these certain batters? Well, listen, I mean, this is a question that's as old as baseball. Is batters get hot and you don't want to give them free bases if you can avoid it. And so, the Rangers are trying to attack these hitters. I'll go back to my first year covering baseball in 1994 and still remember this with a guy who became a dear friend, the Marlins manager at the time, Renee Latchman. I think Reggie Sanders Marlins had just played the Reds 2 series, and Sanders had gone like 10 for 16, I think it was. And I thought of the brilliant, hard-hitting question. This is first-year baseball guy to ask Latch. Do you think you need to pitch to Reggie Sanders differently? And in his inimitable way, he has a very loud voice and booming, and he's very can be kind of smart alecky, which I like, smart ass. Said no, we're going to continue to just throw him pitches down the middle. Um, and so the takeaway from that is, yeah, you've got to find new ways to attack batters. But there are times when batters just get hot, and they're good hitters. You you're not just going to give up after a game or two during a series. You've got to continue to attack. Um, uh, so what are we asking about? We asking about Eugenio Suarez here? Is that what we're asking about? Um,
That would be my assumption.
is okay. So I'm going to assume that was Eugenio Suarez. I haven't seen transactions today, so let me just look at trade rumors real quick while I'm answering this question.
I do believe
Um,
both Cincinnati players cleared.
okay. So yeah, Eugenio Suarez and Friedel were on waivers. They're both eligible to continue playing while the waiver process is ongoing, and that was from last night. Okay, and they will remain with the Reds. So um, they cleared, will remain with the Reds. Uh, Here's the problem with Eugenio Suarez and claiming, and which would have been the problem with claiming him, is he's making $15 million this year. And look, the Rangers basically couldn't add any payroll at the trade deadline. There's still about $2.5 million left in Suarez's deal for this year. So that's probably why the Rangers would not have claimed him. Uh, I don't think Ray Davis was going to invest another $2.5 million uh, on a guy who had a 208 batting average and 705 OPS this season. But uh, this is, it's better than some Rangers hitters. But I think the bottom line is the price tag was going to be too much for the Rangers to have interest. Um, but it certainly wouldn't hurt to have another effective right-handed hitter. Uh, the real Ben Kaysen. Do you think Jack Leiter could be a reliever in 2027? I saw Texas using him as a reliever in the minors. Lots of success has to be interesting for Texas to think about. I will refer you back to the question about 5 minutes ago. Right now, I think the Rangers are going to have a hard time coming up with five starters. And so the preference is for Jack Leiter to be a starter. The only reason the Rangers tried him as a reliever last night is because he's had problems coming back from this ankle surgery, maintaining strength with his ankle tiring out from fatigue, where it's been surgically repaired, uh, where the little area is still hard to control, for lack of a better term, or to get his body to move exactly the way he likes it. What I will say is Jack only pitched an inning last night. He was supposed to pitch two. Couldn't go back out for the second inning. Got hit in the first inning. Um, and so I would not expect Jack to be back anytime soon. And you may get to a point here in the next 10 days or so, if the season goes south, that the Rangers think the best option is to just let Jack get healthy through the offseason. Um, but no, this organization views him as a starter, continues to view him as a starter. Uh, didn't want to use him in the bullpen, but the circumstances that arose, that calling for the Rangers to want to get him back as quickly as possible, to have some areas of shortness in the bullpen, and the fact that Jack wasn't having the ability to go longer into games, all suggested it was worth a try for the short term. Again, for the short term, he will not be a reliever in 2027. Would be my strongest comment. Rarities, is something wrong with Wyatt's arm? Listen, I don't think that Wyatt Langford has ever fully recovered from the forearm strain that he suffered earlier in the year. I think he's managed it, he's played with it, and he's posted up, but clearly his arm is is not what it was last year or what it was the first month of the season. Um, Rangers haven't really discussed this other than to say, look, everybody's managing something at this point in time. Uh, I don't know if this is going to require some kind of procedure in the off season, but I've seen the same things as you guys have over the past couple of weeks, where it seems like it's gotten progressively worse, um, both in terms of arm strength and certainly accuracy. He's made a couple of just of poor throws that weren't close, and so he's trying to get it out. That's what guys do at this point in time in the season. But while the Rangers are playing it close to the vest, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that he either needs more rest, which is what the offseason would provide, or there's going to be something that needs to be further addressed there. Um, are we done seeing Jock play first for the rest of the season? Um, I don't know. Listen, Jock is not a great fielding first baseman. Justin Foskey's not a great fielding second baseman. Last night, they both struggled on a pop up that should have been routine for somebody on the right side. And Jock's not as mobile at first base as Jake Berger is. Nobody disputes that. Nobody disputes it. But the Rangers need offense, man. The number one priority right now is scoring some runs, and so early in games, in particular, they are willing to sacrifice some of that to get a lineup that Skip Schumacher thinks will be more able to produce runs. Now, again, the other problem is if you're going to give Corey Seager a day off his feet at shortstop, you've got to move him to DH. You still want to have Peterson's bat in the lineup somewhere, and really the only place to play him is at first base. So, yeah, you give up some defensive ability there, but you're hopeful that Jock provides offense. And you know, last night after the Rangers got down 2-0, he tied the game with a home run. He leads this team. Did he lead the team, or is he tied with Berger? It's weird. I've thought to myself 100 times this year. I've not cited any. He and Jake Berger have 23 home runs. I've not cited old school stats enough at all. Like, um, we only talk in OPS now, or we talk in one weighted runs created plus. We don't talk about home runs. Maybe that's because the Rangers don't have anybody with 30 homers. But Jock Peterson and Jake Berger lead the team with 23. Berger uh, and Zeke Duran lead the team in RBIs with 76 and 70 respectively. So I guess my point in all this is I don't want to forget some of the old school stats to me, and I know they're counting stats and so forth and so on. But you hit a lot of home runs, you lead a team in home runs, that's worth mentioning. So that's my take on that. Um, the real Ben Kaysen is back. Uh, what do you think the odds are we get to see Walcott here before the end of the year? So Sebastian's probably not going to play the field until like right around Labor Day, September 7th. And then I think the Rangers would want to see him in the field at least for several days before they considered adding him to the roster. I know he has gone in a little bit of a slump at Double A. I think he had a couple of offers. Let's see what he's done over the last week. I wish I had a quicker way of getting stats to you. Well, last night he had a big game, 3 for 5, but he had been in He'd been in a week long 3 for 26 skid. Um, was helped out by the fact that he took almost as many walks as he did struck out, but nevertheless, he was 3 for 26. Anyway, I think that more even so than performance, the thing the Rangers are going to have to consider is if you put Sebastian Walcott to bring him to the big leagues, you've got to put him on the 40-man roster first. If you put him on the 40-man roster, then he stays on the 40-man roster. If he stays on the 40-man roster, and we do have a lockout in December, club can't contact him. The club can't bring him into their spring training facility for workouts. Uh, he's basically a big leaguer in that regard throughout the winter, spring training. That, for a guy who missed a lot of time this year, it's a risky proposition because now you're talking about a guy who may go almost the great majority of depending on what the lockout does next year. I'm all over the place, but you're just looking at the possibility that he could lose significant playing time. The guys who are not on the 40-man roster can play in a minor league season, can go to spring training, can do everything. So that's a real consideration for the Rangers, and he's not eligible or must be protected on the 40-man roster until after the 2027 season. So the Rangers have a decision to make. Um, Look, if they think a playoff spot is is really feasible and viable, I don't think that they would rule bringing him up, and adding him. But if they don't play well between now and September 7th or 10th, whatever it is, I think that will answer that question for everybody. So it's an interesting situation to watch. Uh, Gallagher chant back. Osuna is still in Round Rock while we do Jack with RISP. Think he'll be back soon, or is he in the doghouse? Um, Again, I like Alejandro Osuna too. Um, I think a lot of Ranger fans like the way he plays the game. Probably not as crazy about the way he's gotten reads in the outfield this year. Has not been a great defensive outfielder uh, at all. And last week, I think at the end of the last week, when the Rangers started Zeke Duran in center against the left-hander, um, I kind of brought up the point that, hey, should this team, find a way to get Duran in the lineup in center field more and sit Evan Carter more, even against right-handed pitching. If you go back and look at the numbers on any of the left-handed options, even though Evan is not hitting great against right-handed pitchers, you look back at any of the left-handed hitting options, or even any of the right-handed hitting options, and they're doing no better than Evan against right-handed pitching. So it's hard, to take a guy out of the lineup who's been such a defensive asset, even though he's been a drag, I think, on the offense. It's hard to go and bring a guy up whose offensive numbers on the whole may be better, but whose offensive numbers against right-handed pitching, with the primary reason he would play, are not as good. Um, I feel for Alejandro. I think he deserves to be in the big leagues, um, but it's kind of a roster crunch situation here. Um, he's not. If he's going to be up here, then he's got to play regularly. If he's not, I think you go back to the experiences of some of the guys the Rangers have brought up here very quickly, um, like Evan Carter and Wyatt Langford, and I think there's some parts of their games that could have been polished up a little bit more in the minor leagues. I think it's just more important for Alejandro Osuna to get everyday at bats and continue to hone his approach and maybe find a little bit more um, ability to square balls up. He's good in all the aspects of small ball and of adjusting his swings to different planes. I think he does that as well as anybody on the team. He's willing to take a quote unquote ugly swing to get the job done. Um, but given his weaknesses in the outfield, the only place to play him would maybe be at first base as a left-handed option against right-handers to sit Jake Berger down, and maybe that's in play after September 1st. I just think it's a tough situation. It's a numbers game. It's part of the business that kind of stinks. But I understand where the Rangers are at with this. Um, who's winning the World Series this year? Would love it to be the Brewers from Mayfield Robin. Oh man, look, I'd love to see just a kind of create more chaos. I'd love to see a Tampa Bay Milwaukee World Series because I think it would create chaos in the narrative that big payrolls are ruining baseball. If you've got two low payroll teams who have found competitive advantages on the margins making the World Series, they have the best records in their respective leagues. Um, it's hard for me to think that the Dodgers though won't be there just because of the depth of that roster. But uh, I will for the sake of being a contrarian and for wanting as much chaos as possible, let's go with right now a Tampa Bay over Milwaukee World Series. I don't know that the TVs would love that, but certainly be an example that small market teams, low payroll teams, can win and play championship baseball. So that's my thought for today. Maybe tomorrow I'll be in a different mood. Stephen, we did answer uh, the Walcott question. Uh, what do you think of Walcott this way? On the pun meter, it's got a lot of grown ability to it because for those of us of a certain age, it brings the classic rock genre into it, and I try to do that every time I can, no matter how much of a stretch it has to be. Um, but it also adds the extra syllable, right? Because Aerosmith's song was "Walk This Way." This is "Walcott This Way." Uh, I like it. Probably if I came up with it, I'd feel much better about it. But since somebody else did, I've got to move it along. But it's a good try. Good try. Uh, the Hewlin Mall. The Astros already fired their GM. Do you see Chris Young getting the boot in the offseason? No, I do not. I think Chris Young has as much power as just about any GM in baseball or any chief operating officer in baseball. But it is certainly interesting to see that three of the five teams in the American League West, which is the worst division baseball has had in quite some time, uh, have all been fired or have left. David Forrest in Oakland or Sacramento, he wasn't going to move with the team to Las Vegas. The club decided to move on. Dana Brown in Houston, and Perry Manazian in Anaheim, where I think John Mozeliak, the former Cardinals GM and president, uh, um, has been named on an interim basis, and I think he may end up getting the full time job. But no, I do not see Chris Young being fired. Like I said, I think he's got as much power as just about anybody in baseball right now. Um, Not to say that he doesn't have flaws. Every GM has flaws. Chris and I have gone head to head on some of those things in the past, but I think he's got a really creative mind. I think he's been hampered by the fact that the Rangers went one way with payroll in 2022 and 2022 and 2023. They've since reversed course, but have left themselves with a top-heavy roster and have had to trade in some races to try and booster the team, and that's cost them some minor league players. And so I think the most important thing the Rangers need this offseason is a clear 5-year plan um, from ownership on what payrolls should be, what payrolls will be, and what commitment it will make to the team. I'm not sitting here advocating for the Rangers to necessarily go to a $300 million payroll. I just think it's important that this club, well, that any organization basically has a 5 year plan. I know it's been an unpredictable time in baseball for revenues with the implosion of the regional sports network. But I think if you're going to reset this offseason, if you're going to move some guys off the roster, I think at that point in time, it's also important that you say, this is what I can guarantee you, even if I have to write a check for my own wallet to cover it. This is what I can guarantee you for payrolls of each of the next 5 years. Now, that certainly allows for some case by case additions, but I think to plan out a real contention, a long term window of contention, you've got to have a 5 year plan for payroll, how you're going to manage the minor league system, and stick to it. I think what I've seen too much of the Rangers over the last decade has been waffling between the two. You go back to going into the 2020 season, which was, such a disaster based on COVID. But I think that at that point in time, the Rangers were into a rebuild that John Daniels had kind of advocated for. They were a little bit hamstrung because the Darvish trade didn't bring them back quite as much as they would have hoped it would. But they were in a rebuild process. Well, here comes the new stadium. Ray wants to have some degree of splash. The Rangers trade for Corey Kluber. Season gets postponed. Kluber pitches 1 inning, and that goes out the window. And so that whole rebuilding or that whole reacceleration went up in smoke, and then they're back to rebuilding in 2021, and then Chris Young comes and joins the organization, and now they're spending big, and then 2 years later they win a World Series, and now they're not adding to that, and the TV revenues are going down, and it's just all over the place. So there you go. Any idea if you can put a no trade clause player on waivers? Would be an interesting workaround rule. It would be an interesting workaround that rule a bit. Um, yeah, I honestly I think that's a good question. I'd have to look at the rule book to give you a definitive answer. I don't feel comfortable with it. I think they can be placed on waivers. Um, I think they can be placed on waivers. That's the best I can tell you. But I don't know for sure. Uh, wow, we've still got a lot to get to it. Hewlin Mall, I understand the players are responsible for their performance at the plate, but how much influence would you say Justin Veely has on their performance? Is it time for a new hitting coach? Um, Guys, I've been through this before. I don't give too much credit or lay too much blame on coaches, and less now than ever before, because so many players have their own private instructors, whether it's pitchers or hitters, from strength and conditioning all the way through their program. So um, it's a really hard job to handle. Secondly, Justin Veely was in his first year in the organization last year. He was basically, while he worked closely with Nani Ecker, he was not the head hitting instructor. And when the Rangers made a change, it wasn't exactly clear how much responsibility Brett Boone had and how much responsibility JV had. And so I also think that this is his real first year as the hitting instructor or running the program. And I do think that we've seen improvement from guys who we had questions about, right? Largely Ezekiel Duran, Josh Young, both had big bounce back years. Certainly, Evan Carter has not improved the way you would like. But if you go back and look at this Texas Rangers offense, I don't think the Rangers offense is very efficient. I don't think that they do a great job at optimizing their run scoring opportunities. I don't think that's a strategy or instruction issue. I think it's that guys just aren't good at executing those things. Um, it's the best way I can put it. And listen, the Rangers are not are not that much of an anomaly. Hitting's just bad. It's just bad around the league, man. There's no other way to say it. Uh, and I think hitters have less instinct than ever before. The Rangers are a 715 OPS team this year. The league average is 719, so they're basically right there. Um, and it's an improvement over last year, slight improvement. Uh, and so, could the Rangers make another change at hitting instructor? Sure, but that would be what, their fourth hitting instructor in 3 years. I'm not sure that's a really positive approach either. So, the second part of your question, you think Michael Young would come back as a coach, like bench coach, hitting coach? I feel he'd be great in that role. Michael Young would be great in any role. Um, Never been so confident to say that about a player as I am with Michael, only because I've known him for 25 years. I get a pretty good idea of how his mind works. But I also know that, to quote Dolly Parton, you know, it's good. It's a really good thing to remember here. Don't be so busy earning a living that you don't live your life. And Michael gave his entire adult life through the age of 30, from being from the time he went off to college uh, till he retired after the 2013 season as a baseball player. And that left his family at home a lot. It left him unable to really be there at the early stages of some of his kids' lives. And I think he was very intentional when he retired that his first priority was his family. He's still very involved with the Rangers. He is very he thinks through things really well. He offers a good voice, but I don't see Michael Young being willing, at least now while he's still got two kids at home, um, to leave that. And he's been really clear on that because there have been times when he could have been the manager here, where he could be in a full time front office role. And so that's just not happening. And that's not bad for anybody. Michael's a good dude, cares about his family and spending time with them, and also cares about this organization and invests time in it. So, could you see the Seager moving to second base in 2027 to preserve his health and move Duran to short? No, I think if Seager moves anywhere, it will be to another team with Ezekiel Duran moving to short. Now, if Seager does move somewhere on the diamond with the Rangers, it would more likely be first base. I just don't see him being real willing to make that move. And maybe that ends up being the leverage or the pressure point the Rangers apply to get him to accept a potential deal. Um, but no, I think the Rangers have, well, we talked about Sebastian Walcott being a potential great prospect. Well, he is a great prospect, but being a great major leaguer. I don't think that I ever thought uh, that Sebastian was going to play shortstop in the big leagues on a regular basis. Maybe that's an old school approach just because he's so tall. Look, Ellie De La Cruz is doing it in Cincinnati, but I think more likely Sebastian ends up either at third base or he ends up in the outfield. Um, but in Duran, the Rangers have an already better, in my mind, defensive option at shortstop than Corey. So if there's movement anywhere, it's going to be for Duran to go to short and Corey to either go to first base or trade. Um, when will Parrish, Walcott, and Dryling get promoted to AAA? Uh, I think that there's I think the Rangers would like this group to maybe. I've heard some talk about this, but nothing definitive. I think the Rangers would like, particularly if Walcott doesn't come up to the big leagues, would like that group to stay in Frisco and uh, run through the Double A playoffs, the Texas League playoffs, and that team has some chemistry, and that team may, in time be the heart of the Rangers roster. So, um, I don't know if the Rangers will do the AAA thing or not. Um, and I think that there is a consideration of the AA playoffs being involved. Can a team do anything to offset the state income tax when trying to trade a player? Um, you can pay a player an exit bonus, I suppose. Uh, that's one thing you could do, and that's something that guys with no trade clauses often ask for. Is let's play. Give me an exit bonus that's going to make up for the money I lose. So, or you buy me out of the no trade clause, essentially. Uh, any update on the Great Queso race in Dallas? Saw a comment on last week's video asking. I have eaten so much queso over the past 3 weeks that it's good to be on the road and taking a break from queso. But we've had some good quesos. I had some watery queso at a popular spot that wasn't great. And we've still got some queso tasting to do. We are also tasting some margaritas and fajitas at that in that whole situation. So there's a lot of Mexican food updates to provide you with, hopefully within the next month. And with that, I think we're gonna wrap it up. We've been on for an hour today. I know it wasn't as exciting as uh, Cinna's stream, where Tiffany Stratton was delivering chair shots to her. Maybe next week, maybe next time we have one, we'll either ask a WWE wrestler to join and give me some chair shots, or maybe Joey will give me some chair shots. Whatever, but whatever it'll take
Evan, spoiler alert, we have AEW's Athena coming to the office on Tuesday. Dynamite's here next Wednesday.
Dynamite, huh? Okay. Well, we'll see. We'll see. Maybe they'd like to give me some chair shots. So, um, anyway, we're going to wrap it up here. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I am going to, at some point in time, eat some cheese here in Milwaukee and probably a brat. And I will be back either next week or the week after with another streaming episode. This week's Ranger podcast will drop tomorrow. We talked with Andrew Heaney about a lot of stuff in the 2023 season, from Creed being the song of the club to Corey Seager's mic drop moment and the impact of Nathan Eovaldi on that pitching staff and maybe the long-term impact that he has. And that's about all I've got for you right now. Thanks for joining. You guys are the best. I really appreciate all the input on these things, and we will hope to continue doing them for you. So until next time, everybody, take care. Peace out.